Problem.
Um, I was really I've been following your work for a while, and I've been a big fan of yours for a while. Like I said, I'm from a farming background myself, a big Welsh farming background. We're hill farmers as well, actually, in the Brecon Beacons.
Okay.
I've recently graduated from uni about a year and a half ago in journalism. So I've interviewed a fair few people, and I wanted to reach out to you and see if I could get an interview with you, basically, and discuss your impact in farming, talk about what's on your jumper, no farms, no food.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot to discuss, really. But thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's go for it. No problem.
Let's go. So, um, what made you want to speak out about farming and take it publicly with the British public and be involved with the media?
Um. Yeah. So that most probably started in the late or the early 2000s. I just thought, there was an opportunity for a rural voice to be heard. So I did a bit of television work with the BBC and did a few bits and bobs for S4C. But then I built more of a social media platform where I thought it was easier for me to say what I wanted to say. If you're, working for a television company, they edit to or they edit to what they want to portray. Yeah, look, I made some great television and it worked well and it helped my platform. But then I just felt, supermarkets, governments, all the pressure was coming towards the agricultural sector. TB, NVZs, all these things were relevant and nobody was listening. Farmers were getting blamed for the climate crisis. Farmers were getting blamed for sewage into waterways and into the sea. Farmers were getting blamed for anything and everything. So that's why I wanted to stand up and start to, push the narrative of the importance of the farming community and what we do. And, we're not perfect by a long way, but, there's a lot of good people out there that are working 24/7 to feed the nation.
Do you think that farmers have to be communicators and educators as well as producers, especially with the lack of education out there?
I think the educational curriculum and the way that the governments and the supermarkets have moved people away from seasonal, local, sustainable food production has been very, very clever. So we're fortunate now that we do have a social media platform and we can build around that. We can educate people, we can bring younger children and younger adults back into the farming communities because there's some great youngsters coming through now and starting to shine. And that's really, really important. But it is, it's a lot to do with education, and people have to understand where their food comes from, how it's produced, what's the best way, how healthy it is for them. We are what we eat, and all these things are so, so important for me as a human being, not just as a farmer, as a father and a grandfather and as a husband. I want to feed people with natural, good, wholesome food.
Yes, because obviously, like there's a lot of fast food chains around now, and the big brands such as McDonald's, KFC, they're trying to grab people's attention as much as they can. Do you think that how much has local produce gone down over the years since you've been involved in farming?
Oh, there's been a massive demise in the last 35, 40, maybe 50 years, because my grandfather used to milk about 10 cows here, and he would take that milk around the local village. You had three butcher shops here in the village that had their own little abattoirs where they would kill their own lambs, beef, chicken. A lot of people would hunt, shoot, fish, and all that food would go into the food chain. You would have people growing potatoes, Swedes, all the veg, and you'd have little market gardens all across our country. And that's what the supermarkets have really pushed. They pushed the smaller family farm into a bigger unit. So most farms are concentrated on one thing. It's either cereals, it's milking, eggs, beef, sheep. It depends on your land itself. But a lot of this has been literally put all your eggs in one basket, and now we can see, that the price of milk is absolutely collapsing. The price of cereals is absolutely collapsing because of maybe overproduction on the milk, but cheaper imports as well coming in, as in the cereals and with some of the milk products. So, it's getting that balance. So we need to be pushing our narrative to the consumer that there's fair trade for growing bananas, there's fair trade for coffee producers, there's fair trade for so many different farmers across the world, but there's no British fair trade for the British farmer, and that should be very, very hard pushed now for these supermarkets and for the consumer to ask these questions.
Is there anything that the supermarkets look for? Like, is there new criteria every 5 years, like the supermarkets look for when it comes to selling meat
No,
and produce?
supermarkets are only there to make money.
Right.
Yeah. They're only there to serve the shareholders. They don't give a flying fig about farmers. They don't care about anything except the money. Follow the money every time with the supermarkets. And I don't care who they are, or what they say. They are all about profit. But without the consumer and the customer going through that door, um, they're not going to make a profit. So I think it's up to the consumer and the customer is to shop locally when they can. So the butcher, the greengrocer, the fishmonger, the baker, if they can do that, fantastic. Do it as much as you can. But everybody's life is 100 miles an hour. And, these supermarkets click and collect, and it makes, people's lives a lot easier if they're working 7 days a week, or they're working 6 days a week, or they're working split shifts. So, it all comes into how do we then adjust what we've got to add value to the products as a farmer. So we have to work with our consumer and customer. And if the consumer and customer is asking, are these farmers getting a fair price from the supermarkets, then maybe the supermarkets will start to listen.
Speaking of adjusting, obviously, how will you adjust if you want to pass your farm down to your children? How is it different to when your father passed the farm on to you?
Um, Good question. Do they want the farm? That's maybe the first question. Do they want to carry on doing what I'm doing? Who knows? I think that's a generational thing. We've been here for 375 years, so that's quite a long time to be in the same place. So it's hopefully the next generation will slide into place, but it's a generational thing. So it's handed down in time, and it's handed down when the time's right, or when something radically major happens. I'm fortunate because I have a few other businesses, as in the immersive tourism business. I have a clothing business as well, and a few other things. So I'm fortunate that not all my eggs are in the farming basket, literally. But I want my children to have a opportunity to do what I did, and that is to have a pretty good life, doing what I'm doing. You're never going to be a multimillionaire farming. That's the truth, unless you're on a vast scale, or you sell your land for solar or into bloody housing. The only way that you will make a hell of a lot of money is that way. But it's a way of life, and we're only custodians of this land, and I think it's important that we put that message over to the government as well. This inheritance tax was one of the most stupidest things that they could have ever done.
So do you think that the general public, the regular people that lives in the towns and cities, do you think they understand the impact of no farmers, no food, and no future, or do you think that they just see it and they just repeat it, and that's the same thing with politicians, or do you think there's an understanding of what that actually means?
I've got to be totally honest here, and I really do think that these farmers have become very, very much connected. I'm not sure if that's your phone or my phone. It's my wife's phone. Don't forget. Sorry. Yeah. Dwi'n neud thingy, Mary. Na i ffonio, mam ffonio yn 2 munud, okay? Oh, dwi'n ffonio mam. Okay. Yeah, so it's for me, I think things are better because the consumer and the customer are very much supportive. Um, educational wise, I think we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of things that we need to be connecting them with, having an understanding, and we're to blame a lot because we've buried our heads in the sands as an agricultural industry. We've got maybe one program for the whole BBC, as in Countryfile, which is not really relevant. And if you look at how many cooking shows you have compared to how many farming shows. It's minuscule. So the educational side of it has been difficult for us as an industry. But now we've got the social media platforms, I think we can push that narrative, we can educate people, and we are getting a lot of support. I've got to say, I can't thank the general public enough because they have been fantastic recently. It's been really, really good.
How do you think the next generation of the young, literally the next generation of kids, how do you think they're going to approach farming? Obviously, it's different now, but are they taking an interest in farming? Are the youth still interested in farming?
Oh, there's always youngsters coming in, but you've got it's a it's a way of life more than a job. So, I'm hopefully believing that there will be more value for what we do. So, the next generation will be valued more by governments, by supermarkets, and they protect them. They get a fair trade for what they do. You cannot keep putting, your hours in for very, very, very poor rewards, and that's what it's been. So going forward, I think a lot of these young farmers have got to look at their businesses and start to diversify, look at ways where they can add value to the products that they've got or they are producing, and add value to the farm itself. In whichever ways, if it's immersive tourism, if it's renewables, we have to find ways where we can add value to that whole business now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Do you think how did the impact of COVID-19 affect farming industry overall? Did social media being around, did that help farming stay alive in many ways?
Yeah, it didn't really affect me. I carried on with my work as it was. I had no choice. We couldn't work from home because we work from home anyway, don't we? So yeah, look, there was a few things that it made it a little bit more difficult, but we just got on with it. I think social media was a help because it could really show people what we had to carry on doing. And there was a few scares, when there was a few, big companies that couldn't procure foods, so they were very, very close on not being able to get that into the supermarket shelves. So, there would have been food shortages, food problems similar to the toilet roll fiasco. So there was challenges, but we dug in deep. We didn't ask to be clapped at the door or anything. We just got on with it, and we fed the country in the best way we could. And I think that's really important, the food security side of things, that we're more self-sufficient than what we are now. We need to build that. We need to build a better Britain on our bellies, and that will start with the farmers. Because, if we get another pandemic, if we get another war, people will be desperate to be fed. And if, the imports stop, people will go hungry very, very quickly in this country.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. In terms of your going back to the beginning of your media career in the ways, how did the BBC first approach you and how did you feel about that when you were first approached?
So I literally started doing a few bits and bobs. It was a program called The Big Country. And then I did an S4C one in 2009, which was Ferrum Factor. And I bounced off the Ferrum Factor from a researcher that was working on that, went to work on Snowdonia 1890, which I got the first interview into that. Worked on Snowdonia 1890, which was a big, big BBC production. And then in 2010, in 11, sorry, we just did bits and bobs. And then 2013, we did an occupational documentary, which was called The Hill Farm. So they followed my year on the farm, 12 months, kids and all, in 2013. So it was a long time ago. And that was BAFTA nominated. We didn't win, but we got to go to the BAFTAs, which was, yeah, it was a hell of an experience. Then we did Farmer and the Food Chain. Then we did The Milkman. Then we did Family Farm, where three families came to live here for 3 weeks on the farm, learning skills. And that was my last, was probably major presenting role with Kate Humble with the BBC. Yeah, we pitched quite a few ideas after that, but nothing came to it. I think maybe my profile and my standpoint was maybe a little bit too right for them to uh, put me on the television. But look, it hasn't bothered me. We had 64 million views just on our Facebook page in December. We run about 3 million followers across the board now, 160 odd thousand on TikTok, 2.5 million on YouTube, 450,000 on Facebook, 80, 90,000 on Instagram, same on X. So, the big numbers. So people are interested. So, the BBC and the mainstream media are dying a death anyway. They're not, people don't want to pay their licenses. There's a lot of people that find them too close to the establishment or too close to the government. So, I think social media has a lots of open doors for people now. And there's a lot of rubbish on there as well. There's a lot of people that are miscommunication and misinterpreting people. So you've got to be careful of what you watch and what you believe. But as a farmer, I try to be as factual as I can, and sometimes I get it wrong. I'll get things wrong, and I'll put my hands up and I'll say that, and that's really really important. We've got to be very honest with our audience, and I think that's why maybe my social media pages have grown. I'm controversial, yeah. I'm like Marmite. Some people love me, some people hate me. I don't really care about that side of things. I just want to make sure that people understand the importance of what we do every single day.
Do you think your approach, like you just called yourself Marmite, do you think that's the reason why you have got the level of attraction that you've got?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of haters there that give me a lot of algorithms, to be honest with you. They come on and they say something, and then the people that really like me will have a go at the people that really hate me, and then it goes. So yeah, I tend to be a bit naughty sometimes. I just throw in a hand grenade and walk away and have a cup of tea and just watch everybody going. Bleh. But at the end of the day, we have to have a conversation to find solutions to our problems. And even if it is haters, even if it is people that can't stand you, it's good to have them conversations. And we need free speech. We need the opportunity to put our voices over to other people. So, I quite like that challenge. I quite like that interaction. And, when people do come after you, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing if they don't like your standpoint or if they don't believe in what you say. Yeah, bring it on. Let's have a debate. Let's have a conversation. I'm not afraid of that.
The main thing I want to discuss as well is Welsh farming in particular, because how different is Welsh farming to farming in England, or is there not much difference at all? And who's been impacted more?
I think it's across the board, really. I think England had a nicer run than us. It's devolved the agricultural policies in Wales. Um, since Brexit, everything's been thrown up in the air. Now we're getting the SFS, which is the Sustainable Farming Scheme, or if you're a farmer, it's a suicidal farming scheme. So there's two ways to look at it. There's a lot of people against it. There's a lot of people that want it. You've got same in England. They have got so many environmentally based farming schemes. It sometimes doesn't make sense, and we need environmentally based schemes. Don't get me wrong, but the the problem we get with these policymakers, these people, is that they don't really understand that every single farm's different. So if you've got a farm in Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogery here on the Carnella, it's going to be totally different to a farm down in Pembrokeshire, which would be, grade one land that can produce anything they want. And this is why we need to be asking these questions of the different lands we've got and the different farmers, and they tend to divide us as a community as well as an industry. by saying, oh, we need grants for this and grants for that. And then some farmers go, well, they're getting grants for this, and we can't get it for that. And that does divide the whole community. So yeah, I still think that we need uh, a based payment as well to help on food production. I think we need to up our food production innovation. I went to Cornwall to do a program a couple of years ago with S4C. When I went onto this farm, it was a council-owned farm. They were capturing the methane from that farm and they were using it to run generators and to run electricity and to run tractors off the farm, to being self-sufficient. So if we flip that on its head, if we started to use the methane of some of our big cattle units and start to develop more greenhouses where we could heat them greenhouses with the methane from them cows to produce more seasonal food in this country, because energy is one of the biggest costs we've got. So if you could take that equation out, we'll be able to produce good, wholesome food through using energy, which has been captured. Yeah, it's got an initial cost, but it'll be a lot cheaper than if you were paying for natural gas or anything else.
Yeah, of course. Why do farmers call it the suicidal scheme?
Oh, just some farmers find it absolutely crazy because, the industry has a lot of mental health issues and problems already without bringing more red tape and more universal actions. There's 10 universal actions. There's the paperwork and the stress and the strain with another um, policy, with another, yeah, another headache for farmers that's not needed, to be honest with you. But that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? We've got people that are sitting behind desks writing up policies and schemes that are sometimes not fit for purpose. Well, not for everybody anyway.
What shocked you the most in the last 10 years about farming?
Um, the biggest shock was probably is the way we've been misrepresented by mainstream media. I think that's been, yeah, a bit of a shocker, to be honest with you. Especially when, we hear about TB and how people are like, oh, no, it's not badgers that are carrying TB. And again, the main culprits are badgers, and there is an overpopulation of them. And I'm saying that because I'm seeing it with my own eyes. As a kid, there was no badgers on this farm when we were children. We never seen them. The place is overrun with badgers. We've got no hedgehogs now. We've got no ground nesting birds. We've got no bumblebees, and we've had TB here. But if I say anything, all you want to do is kill the badgers. You want to? No, 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 no. There's a difference. So if we reduce the number of these animals, these mammals, we are going to protect our wildlife, our businesses, our whole history going forward. And that's the problem I think sometimes we've got is there is environmentalists, presenters as well, quite high up presenters, you know what I'm talking about. They'll be just out there saying, no, we can't shoot this, we can't do that. But the scientific evidence shows by reducing the numbers of badgers, it will give the hedgehogs a chance, ground nesting birds, bumblebees, and it will reduce the amount of TB. And however people look at it or think about it, the countryside is not wind in the willows. These are big mammals. These are very hungry creatures that need to be fed, and they will eat everything and anything. So if you're not going to balance that situation out, because they're an apex predator, there's nothing else that kills them, only the odd cat. We're going to be in deep doo-doo with our wildlife and with our cattle, and it's costing millions to the taxpayer every year with TB from cows, being taken off. And one of the biggest cow barons in the country, in Wales, will be the government because they're buying them and putting them into the food chain, and they go into the food chain. It's very little cows that don't go into the food chain. So that's one thing. Another thing would be, the way that we were portrayed as polluting the rivers, and we know now that we're getting FOIs on, the big water companies that have been polluting the waters and the seas for years and years and years, and farmers were blamed for it. And these things need to be addressed. We were an easy target, and we really sat back and we took it. But now, you can see enough is enough. Digon and Digon is a group of people that have come together and they are pushing back against government policies, against supermarkets, and just being totally honest with the general public. And we are getting a lot of support.
Why do you think is why do you think there was such an overprotectiveness for badgers? Because it wasn't the same thing for fox as well. There was quite a lot of overprotectiveness for foxes as well.
Because 86% of the general public live in cities, they don't
Yeah.
understand the countryside. And the badger had a protection act, a parliamentary act, because of badger baiting, because people would dig them and fight with them. And I'm against that, but the science tells you that these are a massive problems and overpopulation of them. So the science says go and test their sets. If they are, dirty, if they've got TB, we have to eradicate them. We have to reduce the numbers of these badgers just to help our hedgehogs, just to help our ground nesting birds. If we don't, there'll be nothing left. We'll have a country full of foxes and hedgehogs and nothing else.
What do you think schools can do? Like, do you think there should be a certain subject put in the curriculum? There should be more courses available for like students in their 20s. Do you think the Welsh curriculum could do more for farming to
Oh,
understand?
yeah, 100%. I think we need more farm to fork. We need children growing their own grub in schools. If it's in pots, if it's potatoes, if it's carrots, just keep it simple. Them understanding that hens lay eggs, where lamb comes from a sheep, beef, cows. They need to be educated and take them onto farms, show them how cows are milked for them to have, and they can make an educational choice. And I wouldn't be afraid of taking older children into slaughterhouses either. As a boy, I did a lot of that. I went with my father, and it never frightened me, nor did my children. My children come, they shoot, they hunt, they fish with me, they kill things, they pluck them. It's preparing good, healthy, nutritious food, and it feeds the brain. And that's what it's like. It's not Tesco's that's putting that chicken into that cling film. Yes, it is Tesco's that's putting that, but it's not. It's come from a farm somewhere. And when you go and you see that chicken walking around, you wring its neck, you pluck it, you clean it, and you put it in that cooker. There's a different end to that story. And I think, it tastes better, it's more wholesome, it's more natural. And people have an understanding that, whatever you're going to be paying for that product, hopefully an amount of that will be valued back into the farmer's pocket.
Speaking of like going into the future, where do you see farming going into the next like 5 years in your prediction?
Oh, that's a very, very difficult question. I think we've got a couple of tough years ahead of us again. I think we have. I can see food shortages, and we're seeing food inflation flying at the moment. Um, globally, there's a lot more people in the world that need to be fed. A lot more poorer countries are buying red meat now. Your Indias and your China, they want that red meat. They want the steaks. They want their good food. So we've got to look at ways that we can do this sustainably as well. I think grass fed and, maybe eat less meat, but better meat. It all depends on what the consumer and what governments are having, because I think globally governments have been absolutely persecuting farmers for the last 10 years. So I think maybe another couple of years of that, and then it'll turn around, and people will start to realize that they're going to need a farmer once, twice, or three times every single day.
And just to sort of come to the end of this meeting, and again, I really appreciate your time. But why, in one sentence, why does British farming matter now more than ever? If you can put that into one sentence.
British farming matters because if you want to build a better Britain, it will start on the bellies of the people. Everybody needs to be fed, yeah? And it starts with farmers. So, however you look at it, we are an intricate and an important part of our whole society. And if you lose them people and that skill set, we're in trouble. So, let's have a farming food revolution and build a better Britain on our bellies, starting with the farmers.
Thank you so much for your time. Honestly, I really appreciate it. Like you've been a big inspiration for me and keeping my passion for farming alive. I'm glad that I was able to interview you. It's a great, you're a big name to add to my resume then, and it was a good conversation to talk to you. And I've learned some things myself, to be honest with you, despite being from a farming family. So
Hey, Tom, that's what it's about, mate. I just hope I can help you and all the best in the future, mate.
yeah, I really appreciate it. My mother used to work for the BBC actually one last thing. My mother used to be senior manager at the BBC.
Oh,
She was in the finance department, and she was saying that things are totally different now. Degrees don't matter as much anymore, and it's crazy how the landscape's changed for everybody.
it's woke, mate. I'll be totally honest with you. A lot of it's
Yeah,
woke, and they're afraid of their own shadow. I don't give a
yeah.
shit, you know. I shoot from the hip. I say it as I think it should be said, you know. And I think that's the way we should be as people. Once we start to be scared of that freedom of speech, we lose our credibility as human beings, and we're never gonna, you know, agree with everybody, but we can always, you know, agree to disagree, can't we?
All right, thank you so much again, and hopefully I meet you in person one day, perhaps. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, mate. You take care.
Cheers to that.
Cheers, lad.